What's up, guys? Jordan Schumacher here. In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can create content and build an audience as a complete beginner. And so I get emails pretty much every week from someone who is new to the digital marketing world, has seen a lot of my videos on the importance of, creating an audience, creating content to position yourself as an expert. Maybe they've seen my Facebook group, The Art of Online Advertising, and they see that and they're like, oh, that's cool, that's great, but I could never do that because I'm a complete beginner. And in this video, I want to show you, one, that you can do that, and that actually I think creating content and building an audience as a complete beginner is actually a competitive advantage to creating content as some, critically acclaimed, world-renowned expert, simply because, well, for two reasons. One, as a complete beginner, you're actually more relatable to your audience. And so you'll see, let's just use two influencers in kind of the online business space. Let's say Gary Vaynerchuk and Grant Cardone, right? It's really tough to relate to those guys. They have teams of people working for them. They have, massive office buildings, top of the line equipment. It's just really tough as a beginner to relate to them. They say, hey, you just need to work harder. And while that's true, they also have, in Gary's case, he has 20 full-time people doing nothing but create content for him, right? It's tough to relate to that as a independent solo operator trying to create your own content while also running a business or working a full-time job. And so as a complete beginner, if you are creating content based on what you're going through, what you're learning, the results that you're getting, and how you're able to achieve those results, it's actually significantly more relatable to your audience, which ultimately is going to cause that audience to grow at a quicker rate and cause them to connect with and identify with you, with your brand at a much deeper level. So that's the first reason. The second reason is because as a complete beginner, if you're starting out and you're creating content based on what's true and you're not trying to look like someone else, you're not trying to front, you're not trying to do anything kind of sketchy or kind of trick people into thinking you're something you're not, it's actually a competitive advantage because there's so few people actually doing that, right? If you look at YouTube, there's so many influencers with the Lamborghinis and the selfie iPhones and the planes in the background that are supposedly theirs, and that's just an overdone shtick, right? That's a thing, and there's those influencers kind of come a dime a dozen. But if you actually are genuine to yourself, hey, I'm a beginner, this is the results that I'm getting, here's what I'm going through, and you actually stick with that and you actually create content and you grow with that, that's actually a differentiator in the eyes of a market, because there's not that many people doing that, not because it doesn't work, but because people just aren't willing to put in the work, and the people who are don't think it works. And I actually think that that's a reason, not that I'm some massive YouTube influencer by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that's the reason that I've been able to see the moderate success that I have with my YouTube channel, with my email list, with my community, putting in so few hours of work, because I am differentiated. I don't look like the guys rolling around in Lamborghinis. I don't look like any of those guys because I'm real, I'm genuine, and ultimately I create content around what I'm doing on a day in, day out basis, and I don't try and make it seem like it's anything other than that. And so those are kind of the two primary reasons that I think not only is it feasible to start creating content and building an audience as a complete beginner to any industry or field, but I think it's actually a competitive advantage. And so I want to walk through how you actually go about doing this as a complete beginner, because I get it, that's all great, Jordan, that's great, but I'm a complete beginner. I have no idea, what the hell I'm doing. How do I get started? So let's talk through that. So the first thing that we need to identify is we need to dispel this myth that there's this thing as an expert or an influencer. You just need to get rid of that. What you need to understand is that for any skill in the world kind of falls on this continuum, right? You have your complete newbies over here, and then you have the masters down here, right? And every single person in the world at any single skill set falls somewhere along this continuum. Now, for some reason, most people have this preconceived notion that to start actually creating content around a topic and building a following around that topic, you can really only start when you are to this side of the continuum. There's just this arbitrary line that's somewhere years or decades into the future, and when if only you can reach that point, you can start creating content around your topic. That's just ridiculous, because what about if you are here? What about the content for all of these people? Right? No one's creating content for those people, even though to these people, you are the expert, right? And so if you wait until you're at some level far in the future, one, you're going to wait a long time before you start creating content, if you create content at all. But also the content that you create is probably going to be relatable to these people and these people, but it's not going to be relatable to these people at all, simply because the challenges that you have up here are just completely different challenges than you have over here, right? Like if we're talking about physical fitness, for example, let me just draw a new one. If we're talking about physical fitness, the challenges that you have up here are probably going to be around, okay, how can I actually, I'm starting to plateau. How can I increase my max? How can I avoid injury? Whatever. Like, you're probably already in really good shape, trying to get in better shape, elite athlete shape. Whereas down here, it's like, how the hell do I even find the motivation to get to the gym, right? And so these are just completely different challenges. And so if you're talking about your challenges up here, it's going to appeal to the people who are a few steps behind you. But these people, it's not going to resonate with them at all. Whereas if you start creating content at every stage of your journey, you're going to create content that appeals to these people. And then as you advance, you're going to create content that appeals to where you were. As you advance, you're going to create content that appeals to where you were. And you're going to stair-step your way through so that ultimately, when you do finally make it to this point, this mythical, I'm an expert now, not only are you going to have a massive catalog of content, you're going to have content that is helpful to people across the entire journey, which long term is just a fantastic positioning for you and for your brand. So this concept is known as relative expertise, and it's why even if you perceive yourself to be a complete beginner, you can still create content and you can still create a following, because no matter what you do, no matter how new to something you are, there is always going to be someone behind you on this continuum. And so as long as you're creating content for the people who are behind you on that continuum, it's adding massive value. And in fact, it's probably adding value in a way that the quote unquote gurus who are way ahead of you on that continuum can ever add, because they just can't even relate to the problems that someone at step one is facing. And if you're thinking, well, Jordan, that's great, but I am at step one, there is no one behind me. That's not true. The people behind you are the people who are just thinking about getting started, but they haven't actually started yet. And so no matter where you're at on this continuum, that's why there's an arrow on this side too. No matter where you're at on the continuum, there's someone behind you, which means it makes sense for you to create content, because you can build a following based off of that. So the question then is, okay, that's great. What content do I actually create? And that's really simple. There's three types of content that you can create. So type number one is how to, right? This is as you learn something, you simply rephrase it and then you teach it. So it's how to squat with proper form, how to lose 5 pounds in the next 90 days, how to write a Facebook ad that converts, right? So as you learn things, you then teach those things. And the great side benefit is by teaching something, it forces you to actually articulate what it is you know, which actually helps you get better at the skill as you teach it. So that's number one. Number two is or case studies. So as you're doing something, at some point, you're going to accomplish something in whatever it is that you learn, right? Whether it's, hey, I lost my first 5 pounds. Hey, I made it to the gym 5 days in a row. Hey, I launched my first profitable Facebook advertising campaign. Doesn't matter how big or how small the accomplishment is, at some point, you're going to achieve something in your skill set. All you need to do then is talk about how you did that thing. in my experience, talking about how you did something and telling a story about how you accomplished a thing is some of the most powerful content that you can create. It resonates incredibly well with your audience. People follow you because of your stories. People don't follow you for the how-to content nearly as much as they do follow you for the stories and the how you did something and feeling like they're participating in your story. So that's content type number 2 is how I. And then content number 3 is just documentation, right? And so it doesn't need to necessarily teach anything, but it's just like, hey, here's what I did, right? Could be a Snapchat, I'm at the gym. Could be an Instagram story, I'm traveling, right? It's just simply, here's what I'm doing as I'm working through this process. Now, documentation type content, especially if it's like YouTube, that's more your traditional vlog, it can be more effort to maintain that. It's because it's documentation, it's just documenting what you're doing as you do it. It's tough to batch that, right? And so that's not something that I do a lot of because I batch my content for efficiency and because I just don't have the bandwidth for that. But the quintessential example here is Gary Vee. He has someone following him around with a camera almost 24/7, and as a result, he has his entire business life documented, and he has an entire team of people then that are able to just create all of the content you could possibly want based off of that video footage. And so these are kind of the 3 types of content that you can focus on as a complete beginner to actually build up a following. I would recommend focusing on numbers 1 and 2 to start with. And again, do something in the real world towards learning your skill, whatever that is, and then either reteach that thing that you learn, or if you do something and accomplish something, just talk about how you did it. And if you do that, you're by definition going to build up, if you're right here, you're going to build up an audience of people who are behind you on the continuum. And in that way, you are going to build up an audience. And then as you build up your audience, as you get additional wins, you're going to be able to talk about those additional wins. If you're in kind of the marketing and business field, as you build up an audience, you'll be able to talk about how you built up an audience. And it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy where you're just able to create more and more content, which by definition creates more and more of an audience of people who are following you, paying attention to you. And that is how, even as a complete beginner, you're able to kind of start this content flywheel, build up your content machine, and ultimately build an audience and a platform that knows, likes, and trusts you. And so I'm curious, if you're watching this video and you consider yourself to be a beginner, question for you. 1, are you creating content regularly to build an audience? And second question, why or why not? So if you're not, what's holding you back? If you are, what's your goal with that? If you found value in this video, it would mean the world to me if you could subscribe to my YouTube channel. It means a lot to me. Please leave a comment down below. I try and reply to each and every one. That's all I've got today. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.